The seeds of betrayal have been sown. In the shadows of hope and faith, something darker stirs. Judas, once a trusted follower, begins to question everything he thought he knew about Jesus. And as the tension builds, a quiet storm brews, one that will shake the very foundation of the disciples' world. In The Chosen Season 5, Episode 2, the stakes are higher than ever before, and Judas's internal struggle becomes more than just personal doubt. It becomes the catalyst for something far more destructive. What drove one of Jesus's closest followers to make a choice that would change everything? Let's dive into the epic moments of Judas and Jesus in this unforgettable episode. As the dust settles after the chaos in the temple, the disciples are left shaken, confused, and uncertain. For most of them, the image of Jesus, the gentle healer, the compassionate leader, has been shattered. They've witnessed a side of him they never expected. The righteous anger of a man whose love for God's house is unyielding. Jesus' actions in the temple weren't just a moment of fury, they were a declaration, a statement that would reverberate through the hearts of all who followed him. For the disciples, it was a test of their faith. What did they believe about this man? What did they understand about his mission? But as they stand on the edge of this new reality, there is one among them who isn't just confused. He's beginning to doubt everything he thought he knew. That man is Judas. Judas Iscariot, a trusted disciple, feels the ground beneath him shift. In the wake of Jesus' temple confrontation, a growing unease settles in his heart. His loyalty to Jesus is still intact, but something has changed. The moment that once seemed so clear, the hope of a new kingdom, a Messiah who would restore Israel, now feels far less certain. Judas had followed Jesus because he believed in his vision, in the promise of a revolution that would overturn the corrupt systems that ruled their world. But Jesus' actions, his fury in the temple, didn't align with the Messiah Judas had imagined. Was this truly the path to freedom? Or had Judas been mistaken all along? As Judas's doubts grow, so does his frustration. He begins to question whether Jesus truly understands the gravity of their mission. The tension between Judas's faith and his growing uncertainty builds, creating a silent chasm that he struggles to bridge. It's not hatred that drives Judas, it's confusion. He wonders if Jesus truly sees the bigger picture, if he understands the danger they're all in. But as the story unfolds, it becomes clear that Judas's doubts are no longer fleeting thoughts. They are beginning to shape his actions, setting him on a dangerous path. The other disciples, too, are affected by the events they've witnessed. Andrew, ever the skeptic, voices the thoughts of many when he says, "He's gone mad." But for Judas, it's more than just disbelief. It's a gut-wrenching realization that the man he followed might not be the leader he once believed him to be. The emotional weight of this revelation weighs heavily on Judas, and in the silence of his heart, a question begins to take root. Could there be another way? Could Jesus' methods, his outbursts, his challenges to the religious establishment be the wrong path? And if so, what does that mean for Judas? His fear of being misled is powerful, but even more dangerous is his fear of losing control over his own destiny. But Judas isn't alone in his doubts. Thomas, another disciple, also feels the strain of faith and loyalty in this episode. Thomas's internal conflict mirrors that of Judas's in many ways. He too struggles with the death of Rama and the questions surrounding it. Thomas doesn't just question the actions of Jesus, he questions everything: his faith, his understanding of who Jesus is, and what this mission truly means. It's a brutal reckoning for Thomas, who was once unwavering in his belief. And as he confides in Caiaphas, his doubts become all the more apparent, revealing a man who is grappling with loss and betrayal. This internal struggle for both Thomas and Judas sets the stage for a collision of forces: faith, doubt, power, and betrayal that will ultimately drive the narrative forward. Jesus, in his divine wisdom, seems to sense the turmoil within his disciples, but his path is set. The storm is coming, and none of them can escape it. As the episode moves forward, we see Judas's growing disillusionment beginning to influence his actions in subtle ways. He doesn't yet know where this path will lead, but the seeds of something much darker are taking root. The suspense builds, And the question that lingers in the air is this: will Judas choose to embrace his doubts, or will he take the final, irreversible step toward betrayal? The stage is set, and the line between loyalty and treachery has never been thinner. The trust that once bound Judas to Jesus is being tested in ways that neither of them could have foreseen. And as Judas contemplates his next move, the clock is ticking. The decisions made in this episode will have consequences that echo through time. The Judas we see here is not a villain in the traditional sense. He is a man torn between his faith, his doubts, and his sense of purpose. But as we all know, doubt, if left unchecked, can be the most dangerous force of all. The sun sets over a weary landscape, casting long shadows over the dusty roads where the disciples walk. The tension among them is palpable, thick with unspoken questions and hidden frustrations. As Jesus and his followers journey from one town to the next, the air feels charged, as if something big is about to happen. The disciples exchange glances, their eyes filled with uncertainty. But it's Judas who carries the heaviest weight, the man who once believed wholeheartedly in the mission, who followed Jesus with an unshakable sense of purpose, now feels a growing distance between himself and the rest of the group. It isn't just the temple incident that bothers Judas, it's everything that has led up to it. The moments of teaching that seem to promise one thing, but now feel so ambiguous. The growing political tension, the dangers they all face, and most of all, the growing suspicion in Judas's heart. For the first time, he questions the very essence of what Jesus represents. Is he the revolutionary figure Judas once thought he was, or is he something else entirely? In the quiet of his thoughts, Judas begins to confront an unsettling truth. He's not sure if he trusts Jesus anymore. As night falls and the campfire burns low, Judas finds himself alone, his back to the warmth of the flames, staring out into the darkness. His mind races. The faces of the other disciples flicker in his mind. Peter, always bold, Matthew, thoughtful, Thomas, full of doubt. And yet they all have something in common. They trust Jesus, even when they don't understand him. But Judas isn't like them. His mind works differently. He's always been the one to question, to challenge, to find logic in everything. And now, the logic doesn't make sense. The growing rift between the kingdom Jesus promises and the methods he employs fills Judas with a cold dread. It's during these long, sleepless nights that Judas starts to feel the pull of something darker. The whispers of doubt are no longer confined to his mind. They begin to manifest in his actions. He starts to withhold, to retreat, to pull away from the other disciples, as if he fears becoming too close to them. He still follows Jesus, but now with a different kind of detachment. He listens less and thinks more. He observes Jesus in a way he never did before, analyzing every word, every gesture, looking for cracks in the facade. As the episode progresses, we see Judas's inner turmoil come to a head during a pivotal moment of teaching from Jesus. The crowd is gathered around, listening intently, but Judas's attention is elsewhere. His gaze drifts from Jesus to the faces of the people in the crowd, then to the other disciples. He watches them, their rapt attention, their unwavering faith, and a cold, sharp feeling runs through him. For the first time, he wonders if they've all been deceived. Could Jesus be more than just a prophet, a healer? Could he be someone who will eventually disappoint them all? Is it possible that Jesus doesn't fully understand the stakes at hand, that the time for revolution is running out, and the moment for action is slipping away? This is when Judas begins to consider an even darker possibility. What if the revolution that he believed in, the one he had hoped for, wasn't coming? What if Jesus wasn't the leader they all thought he was? The pain of betrayal, of having pinned so much hope on one man, starts to consume Judas. And in that pain, something begins to shift inside him. He starts to feel anger, resentment, and a desire for control. These are emotions he never allowed himself to feel before. But now they grow unchecked. The seeds of rebellion begin to take root, and Judas starts to feel as though he's the only one who truly understands the gravity of the situation. The other disciples are too idealistic, too trusting. They don't see what he sees, that Jesus' method is too slow, too passive. If they want to see the change they've dreamed of, they need action, and they need it now. But Jesus, to Judas's growing frustration, seems more focused on the kingdom of heaven than on earthly revolt. In that moment, a chilling thought creeps into Judas's mind. What if the kingdom he's been promised isn't the one he wanted? Judas knows something is coming, but he doesn't know what yet. He feels like an outsider in the very group he helped build. Every step forward seems like a step further away from the man he once believed in. And in his isolation, he starts to make dangerous plans. The betrayal that will eventually come, the one that will shock everyone, isn't the result of a sudden, fiery rage. It's the culmination of this slow, painful unraveling of faith. As Judas wrestles with his growing disillusionment, there's one key moment that stands out: a conversation between him and Jesus. It's brief, almost unnoticed by the other disciples, but it lingers in Judas's mind long after. In this fleeting moment, Jesus looks at him with an intensity that feels almost too much to bear. It's as if Jesus sees right through him, into the very depths of his soul. Judas cannot understand how Jesus can be so calm, so resolute in the face of everything they're up against. He wonders, does Jesus know the danger they're in? Does he understand what needs to be done? And more painfully, does he even care? This is the breaking point for Judas. The love he once felt for Jesus begins to crack, replaced by frustration and doubt. The man he once saw as a friend, a teacher, a savior, now feels like a stranger. And in the darkness of his heart, Judas begins to make a decision, one that will change everything. By the end of this section, the audience feels the full weight of Judas's inner conflict. His doubts are no longer whispers. They're a storm gathering within him. He's not just questioning Jesus, he's beginning to question himself, and more dangerously, his place in the story. Every step he takes brings him closer to a precipice, and the closer he gets, the less he can see the possibility of turning back. What happens next is inevitable. Judas is about to make a choice that will echo through history, but the question remains, will he make that choice out of fear or out of the cold certainty that he alone knows the truth? The tension in the camp thickens as the days go by. Judas's internal battle rages on, growing more frantic with each passing moment. His mind swirls with doubt, fear, and a growing sense of betrayal, not just toward Jesus, but toward everything he thought he understood. The more he questions Jesus, the more isolated he feels, as if he's the only one able to see the impending collapse. Around him, the other disciples continue to follow, full of faith, completely unaware of the storm brewing within Judas. They speak of the kingdom of heaven, of miracles and salvation, but for Judas, it all feels distant, as though they're speaking a language he no longer understands. Jesus, in contrast, seems to grow more distant too. Distant, not physically, but in a way that feels almost deliberate. His teachings take on an air of cryptic wisdom that leaves Judas frustrated. What does it all mean? Jesus talks about love, about forgiveness, but those concepts seem increasingly naive to Judas. What good is love if the world continues to crumble around them? What good is forgiveness when the political and social systems that enslave the people are as strong as ever? Judas is lost, unable to reconcile the man he once followed with the leader who now seems unwilling to fight the battles Judas believes are necessary. And it's in this disillusionment that a plan begins to form in the darkest corners of Judas's mind. As he watches Jesus speak to crowds that hang on his every word, he feels the weight of betrayal, of wasted time, of dreams unfulfilled. He begins to consider a drastic step, one that would force Jesus to act, to take charge, to reveal the full extent of his power. Maybe, Judas thinks, if he could push Jesus into a corner, the true revolution would come. But deep down, he knows that the man he once followed doesn't operate like that. Jesus doesn't play by those rules. Still, Judas feels the gnawing certainty that nothing will change unless he forces it to. And in that moment of bitter resolve, a part of him begins to rationalize that it would be better for the cause if things were accelerated. This is the turning point, the tipping point. Judas, consumed by his need for control, begins to entertain the idea of betrayal, not because he hates Jesus, but because he believes that he, Judas, is the only one capable of forcing the change that needs to happen. He's no longer just the treasurer of the group, no longer just a follower. Judas begins to see himself as a necessary agent of change, a catalyst for the revolution. His role will not be passive, he will act. The first step in this twisted plan is to approach the religious leaders, the ones who have long been suspicious of Jesus and his growing influence. Judas knows that they see Jesus as a threat, as a disruptor of the status quo. And if he can just convince them that Jesus is the one they need to remove, the wheels of his plan will begin to turn. In his mind, he isn't betraying Jesus. He's saving him from his own inaction. He's forcing his hand. He's giving Jesus the push he needs to take control. The religious authorities are, of course, more than willing to listen, for Judas is offering them exactly what they want. An insider, someone close to Jesus, someone who can lead them to the right moment to strike. The night Judas walks into their presence is a quiet one. The moon is hidden behind thick clouds, and the city feels like a silent witness to the conspiracy unfolding in the shadows. Judas sits across from the religious leaders, his eyes dark, filled with a mix of desperation and determination. They're skeptical at first, unsure whether they can trust him, but Judas's sincerity, the hint of anguish in his voice, convinces them. He tells them that he can lead them to Jesus, that he knows when and where Jesus will be most vulnerable. His offer is simple: a price, the cost of betrayal. The moment he speaks the words, Judas feels a sickening chill run down his spine. He had imagined it differently in his mind, perhaps as an act of heroism or a necessary evil. But now, sitting in front of these men, a part of him feels as though he's sold a piece of his soul. But it's too late to turn back. He has already made the deal. The money, the weight of it, feels both heavy and hollow in his hands. The deal is done. And Judas knows that there is no coming back from this. As he leaves the meeting, the weight of the decision settles on him like a crushing burden. His heart races, his mind whirls with the enormity of what he has just set in motion. But even in the midst of this storm of thoughts, there's a small, flickering part of him that still hopes. Hopes that Jesus will rise up, that he will fight back, that everything will somehow make sense again. Judas has convinced himself that this betrayal is for the greater good, that this act will lead to the revolution he's been waiting for. But deep down, he's torn. The love he once felt for Jesus is still there, buried beneath the layers of doubt and frustration, but it's now tinged with resentment. The path ahead is now clear. Judas will wait for the right moment, when Jesus is alone, when he's most vulnerable, when his fate is sealed. It's an agonizing wait. Every moment Judas spends in the presence of Jesus, he feels a deep sense of guilt and regret, but he forces himself to push it down. He has a job to do. He must do what he believes is necessary for the cause. What Judas doesn't know, however, is that this betrayal will ultimately tear him apart in ways he never could have imagined. The journey he's on is not just one of physical distance, but emotional disintegration. Judas is no longer just a follower of Jesus. He's become a man in the grip of something much darker, a misguided, distorted sense of purpose that has eclipsed the love he once had for the man he followed. Each step he takes now leads him further into the shadows, away from the light of Jesus' teachings, and closer to an abyss of his own making. The revolution Judas envisions is nothing more than a cruel illusion, one that will only bring pain and sorrow. As the episode reaches its climax, the audience can feel the weight of Judas's decision. His betrayal is no longer just a possibility, but an inevitable truth. The walls are closing in around him, and as he moves closer to the point of no return, the haunting realization begins to set in. He is the architect of his own destruction. The stage is set for the shocking turn of events that will change the course of everything. And as Judas takes the final step toward his betrayal, the audience is left with one question: can anything redeem him, or has he already lost everything? The days leading up to the fateful night are filled with a haunting sense of anticipation. Judas walks through the streets of the city, his eyes hollow, his mind consumed with a restless energy that refuses to subside. Each interaction with the other disciples feels like an act, a play he is pretending to be part of. He cannot escape the crushing weight of his decision. The once tight-knit group of followers has become an oppressive reminder of the life Judas is about to tear apart. He tries to mask his unease, but it's impossible to ignore the cold distance he's created between himself and the others. He can't shake the feeling that they are looking at him differently, even though they don't know the truth of what he's planning. As Jesus continues his ministry, there's a profound sense of sorrow in his eyes, a sorrow that Judas can't quite place but feels deep in his chest. Is it the weight of the burden he's been carrying, or is it something more? Judas had once seen Jesus as the Savior, the Messiah, the one who would lead them into victory and glory. But now, everything feels like an illusion. The miracles, the crowds, the hope, they all seem so distant, like a fading dream. Judas can no longer see the man who performed those miracles. He can only see a figure trapped in his own ideals, a leader who refuses to fight in the way Judas believes is necessary. Jesus is still speaking of love and forgiveness, but it all feels empty to Judas. He has come to believe that inaction is the greatest betrayal of all.